first question really is simply, is MiFID necessary, and how does it relate to other pieces of EU legislation which we should be conscious of? So, Dr. Swinburne, would you like to start?
Well, I guess MiFID II as a piece of legislation is a really all-encompassing piece. It obviously covers a regulation and a directive, and it's very, very extensive in its scope. And so I can see how it's very easy for people to pick holes in what's been produced because there's so much of it. But whether or not MiFID is necessary, I guess there are three reasons why I believe MiFID is necessary. The first one is the fact that actually it's a built-in review clause in MiFID I. And there were a very large number of items, and I have them here, some 7 or 8 issues that needed to be addressed in the review as an official clause in Article 65 of MiFID I. So yes, that did need to happen, and the timescale for that was also built in, which is why it's now. And we've also got the G20 commitments on derivative instruments in particular, but also on commodities, which have been agreed. And so in order to meet the G20 objectives, the EU single market obviously has to bring forward some legislation that allows us to conform with those obligations that we took on board at those meetings. And of course, we've had major technological advancements and developments since MiFID I. And that technology has necessitated some changes and updating of some of the rules and some of the venues rules in particular. And so I think for those three reasons, it is timely that we have this review, and it's necessary.
Mr. Philippona?
Yes. Maybe very briefly, I can summarize what Finance Watch is about. Finance Watch is a public interest group based in Brussels that was founded after the call of 22 members of the European Parliament in June 2010. That called for another voice in the debate over financial regulation that would represent the public interest in the debate. The initial 22 members of the European Parliament became almost 200 elected officials throughout Europe very quickly, representing all political parties, and that's absolutely essential. There is no partisan view in Finance Watch. And today, Finance Watch is a membership organization that has 65 members that collectively represent close to 100 million European citizens, and has a professional team coming exclusively from the financial industry or financial press or the lobby world in order to do our work. I will relate that presentation of Finance Watch to your question. The key principle of Finance Watch is that capital allocation and financial services are essential for society, and that the pursuit of private interest are not only legitimate but indispensable for the economy to function properly. Having said that, we also believe that there is something called public interest, and that public interest is not the mere sum of private interest. And that relates to your question about MiFID. Is the review of MiFID I necessary, yes or no, and why? Well, in a nutshell, our view is that MiFID I was founded on the belief that more competition would bring value to society, and the whole question of the review of MiFID I is about whether that belief was founded and whether a number of actions should be taken to correct perhaps things that are not perfect, or whether we're going in the right direction. In our view, and you read our report, some very good things have been done, because competition is something which is necessary to keep people on their toes, I would say. At the same time, we have seen some consequences of among other things, market fragmentation, which in our view has led to financial markets being more and more efficient and effective in making the possibility of betting and speculating very efficiently, but less and less efficient in the ability of financial market to serve their main purpose, which is to bring together supply of capital and the demand of capital. At the end of the day, we strongly believe that financial markets are here to be a place where the demand for capital from corporations, enterprises, public entities can meet savings brought by, at the end of the day, private individuals. And that is the purpose of MiFID. And I will stop here on this question.
But in a way that answers the question about your view was that MiFID I was, in terms of effectiveness, mixed, to say the least, I think you comment.
Yes, and sorry.
Yeah, but we'll have opportunities to explore that. Dr. Swinburne, you particularly link MiFID II to EMIR, and I wonder whether you'd talk a little more about European market infrastructure regulation and its importance, really. We should bear it in mind when we're looking at MiFID II.
Well, of course, the G20 commitment on derivative instruments was twofold, in fact threefold. The first one was that there was a requirement for all derivative instruments that could be centrally cleared to do so. And so that central clearing process was deemed to be a way of mitigating risk in the system. So you would actually put it into one central place and you'd obviously collateralize against it, and therefore you'd be mitigating some of the risk of some of these derivative instruments, which were obviously playing such a key part in the collapse of the financial sector back in 2007 and 8. And so that was deemed to be a central premise of it, but also the trade repositories, where all the derivative trades, wherever they were conducted, would actually have to be reported to a central repository, and that would therefore give regulators the oversight that was necessary to know what contracts were outstanding in their jurisdictions. And then the third component of that requirement at G20 was to move, where possible, those derivative instruments that were currently traded OTC onto electronic platforms where appropriate. Now, there is a word, where appropriate, in there that needs to be fleshed out a little. But that third topic is the one that gets dealt with primarily in MiFID. And the other two are being dealt with separately under the European Markets Infrastructure Regulation, EMIR. EMIR is well advanced. We have the Level 1 legislation text already in place. We're expecting the technical standards to be drafted by ESMA, the European Supervisory Authority, by the 30th of September. So that piece of legislation, that bit of it, is well advanced. But of course, they're two sides of the same coin, and they actually relate to one another. And the way that the European legislation is working, it split them into two pieces of legislation, whereas in the US it all comes under the one Dodd-Frank Act. So it's a little difficult to keep these consistent and to keep them in the same time frame. So my concern is that we need to make sure that not only are we dealing with the OTC derivative instruments for clearing, repositories and for trading, we also need to look at the existing exchange-traded derivatives, of which there are many, and they have no obligation at this point in time under EMIR to centrally clear. So MiFID will tidy that up, which will give the obligation for derivative instruments, no matter where they're traded, to actually be centrally cleared. And so that will then meet the entire G20 commitment. But these two really are very much hand in hand, and we need consistency across these two dossiers to make sure that derivative instruments across the board get treated similarly.
Well, thank you for highlighting, because highlighting that, and I think we will. I'm just going to, before I have Lord Hamilton come in, just going to give you both of you the opportunity just to give a broad brush approach to MiFID II, which will follow logically on Monsieur Philipponat from what you said before in your assessment of MiFID I, and it would help us both, the two of you, I think particularly Dr. Swinburne, if you could say where you think we are in terms of Parliament and the Commission and the Council, perhaps bring us up to date there, and then we'll have Lord Hamilton. But could you just, the two of you, give us a feel for the strengths and weaknesses of MiFID II?